What happens when two abandoned animals broken by loneliness find each other in one single night at a Tennessee sanctuary? This is the true story of Marshmallow and Biscuit, two creatures who now refuse to take a single step apart. In August 2025, two separate trailers pulled into the Gentle Giants Rescue Sanctuary in Murfreesboro, Tennessee the same week. Alpaca and Donkey came from different directions, different owners, and different kinds of neglect. Each one left, unable to trust again. The alpaca arrived first. His name was Marshmallow, a cream-colored male with a thick fleece and gently curled ear tips. His previous owners moved out of state and simply left him behind on an empty property with no food or water. A neighbor noticed after 3 weeks and reported the situation. But rescuers did not arrive for 3 entire months. For 90 days, Marshmallow survived alone on that lot, eating nothing but weeds growing through gravel beside a dry trough. Alpacas are herd animals. They are biologically wired to live in social groups of 5 to 15 family members at all times. Separation triggers measurable stress responses, elevated cortisol, weakened immunity, and total loss of appetite within just a few days. A solitary alpaca, without any visual contact with another living animal, will simply stop eating. The body reads isolation as danger. Marshmallow survived those 3 months, but only barely. When he arrived at the rescue, he weighed 20 kilograms below healthy weight. He refused the hay they offered him. He stood in the corner of his stall with his head hanging low and motionless, his ears pressed flat against his skull. The alpaca equivalent of shutting down completely. He did not lie down for 2 days. Then the donkey arrived. His name was Biscuit, a miniature donkey with light brown fur and a dark cross-shaped shoulder stripe. Miniature donkeys are bred specifically for companionship. They form powerful pair bonds and suffer severe anxiety when those bonds are broken. Biscuit had been sent to an auction house by his previous owner, who could no longer afford to keep a large animal. At auction, he was passed over again and again. Buyers wanted younger animals or healthier coats, not a withdrawn, frightened donkey. He was eventually sold at a steep discount to a dealer who then contacted the rescue. His spirit appeared completely broken. When Biscuit arrived at Gentle Giants, he refused to leave the trailer. He stood in the same spot without moving for 3 days. Staff brought hay and fresh water to the trailer door. He did not touch either for the first 36 hours straight. Sarah Brennan, the founder of Gentle Giants Rescue, had been running the sanctuary for 11 years across every kind of animal. She had witnessed isolation trauma in horses, goats, pigs, and chickens. She recognized the symptoms immediately in both new arrivals. But she had never seen alpaca and donkey arrive the same week, showing such identical trauma symptoms delivered in such completely different bodies. Sarah made a decision that broke standard protocol. She placed Marshmallow and Biscuit in adjacent paddocks, separated by a wire mesh fence. The fence allowed them to see each other clearly but prevented physical contact. Her reasoning behind this arrangement was entirely practical. Alpaca and donkey desperately needed social stimulation to restart their appetites, but both were far too fragile for a full herd introduction. The existing herd hierarchy would only add more stress. A quiet neighbor behind the fence might be the gentlest possible beginning. That night, something happened that no one at the sanctuary expected. Something that changed both of their lives permanently and completely. Biscuit bit through the rope that secured his paddock gate, not untied it. Bit clean through it with his teeth. The gate had been fastened with a double knot. Donkeys have strong jaws, but not the dexterity to untie complex knots. He crossed the paddock in complete darkness, navigated an unfamiliar space, and found his way directly to Marshmallow's shelter before sunrise. When staff arrived at dawn the next morning, they discovered something remarkable. Marshmallow was lying on the ground for the first time. He had not lain down once since arriving at the rescue. Lying down requires a sense of safety that he never felt before. Biscuit was standing directly over him, positioned between the alpaca and the rising morning sun, casting a protective shadow across his friend. The donkey's body shielded Marshmallow's face and neck from the light. Dew covered the grass everywhere except where Marshmallow lay dry. Biscuit's legs were soaked from standing in the wet grass all night long. He had not moved from that position for hours. He had stood guard over a stranger all night in the cold dew, an animal he had only seen through a fence hours before. That morning, Marshmallow began eating for the first time since arriving at the sanctuary. He walked to the hay and ate slowly. The alpaca and donkey have not voluntarily separated since that single night. Not once. Not for any reason. They simply stay together. The behavioral routines they develop together are so specific and consistent that they appear almost choreographed by an invisible director. Every sunset, when staff opened the barn doors for the evening, Marshmallow and Biscuit walk toward the entrance together, side by side. They never walk in a line, always side by side, with Marshmallow's shoulder approximately level with Biscuit's, neck in perfect alignment. But here's what amazed the staff most. If Biscuit reaches the barn door first and steps inside alone, something remarkable happens. Marshmallow stops at the threshold and will not enter. He makes a soft sound, a nasal exhale mixed with a low hum. It is the alpaca distress call. Not loud, but unmistakable. A sound that says clearly, "I will not go in there without you." Every single time this happens, Biscuit responds immediately. He turns around inside the barn, walks back out, and stands beside Marshmallow again. Then, and only then, do the two of them walk into the barn together side by side through the doorway at once. Staff tested this pattern many times, over many months. The result was always identical. They will not enter the barn without each other. When Marshmallow is taken to the veterinary barn for a routine checkup, roughly a 20-minute procedure, Biscuit's behavior changes completely. The donkey begins pacing along the fence line immediately, from the gate to the oak tree, from the oak tree back to the gate. He does not stop walking. He does not graze. He ignores staff who approach him with treats. The pacing continues without interruption. The pacing only stops when Marshmallow reappears. The moment the alpaca comes into view, Biscuit walks directly to the gate and waits. The reverse is equally true. When Biscuit had his hooves trimmed last September, the procedure kept him inside the barn for 45 minutes. During that entire time, Marshmallow stood at the fence line facing the barn door. He did not move a single step. He did not pace like Biscuit does. He simply stood still with his head raised and ears rotated forward, tracking every sound. Staff brought him fresh hay while he waited. He completely ignored it. His entire focus remained locked on that barn door ahead. When Biscuit was finally led back out of the barn, Marshmallow lowered his head gently and walked forward to meet him halfway. Today, the alpaca and donkey share a paddock full-time. They sleep in adjacent stalls connected by a shared half-wall between them at night. They insisted on this specific arrangement themselves by refusing to settle down or rest when placed in any separate stalls farther apart. When Marshmallow lies down to rest during the day, Biscuit grazes in a tight protective circle around him, never straying more than meters away. When Biscuit rolls in the dust for grooming, a natural donkey behavior, Marshmallow stands guard in the same protective position above him. The same position that Biscuit first used to shield Marshmallow from the morning dew on that very first night together months ago. They learned to protect each other by taking turns. Each one guards while the other rests. A perfect silent system of trust. Visitors to the sanctuary began photographing the pair standing together at the fence. Those images reached Instagram and quickly spread everywhere online. The social media account documenting their daily routines has now accumulated over 500,000 followers in less than a single year. People from around the world send fan mail addressed to Alpaca and Donkey by name. A children's book publisher reached out about their story. Sarah says the attention has been transformative for the sanctuary. Increased donations have now covered veterinary costs for 27 other rescue animals. But she also says Marshmallow and Biscuit have absolutely no awareness of their audience. They do not pose. They do not perform. They stand together because standing apart is simply not something that either animal is willing to do anymore. It is that simple. Their bond formed in a single night, in a paddock in Tennessee, between Alpaca and Donkey that had completely given up on being seen. Marshmallow had been invisible on that empty lot for 90 days. Biscuit had been passed over at auction without a single bid. Neither animal was expected to recover. Neither was expected to eat again on their own. Neither was expected to trust another living being. But somehow in the darkness of that first night, a donkey who had given up decided to bite through a rope for a stranger. And an alpaca who had not slept in days finally lay down on the ground because someone was standing over him keeping watch. Scientists call this a pair bond. Staff at the sanctuary simply call it friendship. Maybe neither word is large enough to describe it. What we know is this: two broken animals chose each other in one night and have not let go since that moment. Every evening they still walk into that barn together, side by side, shoulder to neck, neither one willing to go first alone. But recently something new has happened at the sanctuary. Another trailer arrived. Another animal inside, alone, withdrawn, and refusing to eat. Sarah looked at Marshmallow and Biscuit, standing together at the fence, watching the new trailer, and she wondered, could they do it again?